Hello and welcome to King County Connects, where we take a closer look at some of the important issues in the county and in our region. I'm Enrique Cerna. Metro Transit is facing a $75 million shortfall next year. It means there will be huge cuts in bus service next year without a new revenue source. So how drastic will the cuts be, and what will it mean to your commute? We're talking now with Metro Transit's General Manager, Kevin Desmond, the Chair of the Council's Transportation Committee, Councilmember Larry Phillips, to give us some background and what we can expect if these cuts really do go through. Well, let's start backing up a little bit. Larry Phillips, how did we get here?
Well, the Great Recession took its toll on businesses and governments across the country, and it took its great toll on Metro Transit. The loss in sales tax revenue was enormous. And we faced over 5 years substantial cuts, and we had to deal with that in a way in which we could tell the public we were putting every dollar available to us on the street. But we made substantial changes. We made all the kinds of fixes we could under the circumstances, but at the end of the day now, we have no more tricks in order to solve the problem. And unless we have new revenue, we will simply have to cut the system.
Well, Kevin Desmond, as these cuts were and the recession hit, the fact is that ridership has just continued to increase.
The demand in this county, in the region, really, as the economic recovery is taking hold, is very, very strong. We'll end this year very close to our record ridership that we had just before the recession. Just in October, we had 412 daily boardings, 412,000 daily boardings on the system. Adding in the Sound Transit development as rail continues to take hold, we've been having record transit ridership in King County ongoing, even through the recession. It's about jobs, it's about employment, it's about economic vitality, and it's about quality of life. If this region is going to continue to attract talented, highly paid jobs, more jobs in the region, people need a quality of life, and their transportation network is very much tied to the quality of life. The extent to which we can provide a good product, whether it's on Highway 520 or arterials throughout King County, people will choose our product.
How does this tie into the rest of the state? I mean, we talk about this region as far as helping the economy, giving people an opportunity to get to their jobs. Also the fact that, we have clogged roadways. So, but the rest of the state, how do they benefit if things are working here for Metro Transit?
King County is an economic engine for the entire state of Washington, and the benefits to Olympia and the rest of the state are enormous. When we can't move goods and people because of congestion, we can't get to people to work on time or home in the evening for their families, it causes great disruption. That's why the business community is so supportive of our efforts to solve this problem and to save the metro system. They know the economic impact, so not only here, but to the state of Washington as well. So while transit may not be big in other counties, it's huge here in terms of economic impact.
Let's talk about the potential cuts if this were to come to happen. What are we looking at? How many routes would be cut? What will be the impact of those people that not just live on Queen Anne or in Issaquah, but maybe they're further out and have to come into the city?
We have such a large system. We have 214 bus routes today, and it's a very integrated system. And even though it's 17% of the system we're talking about potentially at risk, the potential impacts really spread around the system. About half the routes will have at least some reduction in service. Another third of the routes will be eliminated totally. So 80% of the system will be affected one way or the other. Either the route's gone altogether, or the buses will come less often, they won't run as late at night, or tail pieces of the routes may be eliminated. And the remaining portions of the system, 33 routes where there will be no changes, those routes are already our highest used routes. They're liable to become even more crowded. So the majority of our customers are going to feel the negative impacts of these reductions. And at the end of the day, we would forecast about 50,000 fewer trips a day, transit trips a day, about 14 million annually, that would no longer take transit. We'd be moving backwards in an era where traffic's going to continue to mount as employment increases and economic activity increases. And as Mr. Phillips points out, ultimately it affects the economy of the region, because that also means then trucks. It's going to take longer for freight traffic to get through the arterials because there'll be more cars on the road.
Now, as we've talked about this before, and at various times, you were hoping for help from the legislature, which hasn't transpired at all. Where are we with that now?
Well, we've been through a regular session of the state legislature this year and 3 special sessions where this has been the top issue for us and many others, saying we need to save our transit system. And so far, the state Senate has not acted or put forward a program that would save the day, both for a statewide comprehensive transportation package as well as local options to save our transit system here. It is frankly unacceptable. I think it's irresponsible. We have all the responsibility of providing the service. They have all the authority relative to solve this problem. So we've gone to Olympia with a very broad and deep coalition to solve this problem. But so far, at least in the state Senate, they have not heard our call.
Now, in the recent special session that happened, and it really dealt more with Boeing, but there had been some hope that maybe there would be movement on a transportation package for the state. And the Senate Majority Coalition has come forward with their proposal, and they had been having some meetings around the state, led by Curtis King, who's a legislator out of Yakima. How do you look at the proposal that they have come up with, and tell me what that proposal is, and is it workable and beneficial for Metro?
We have come a long ways in terms of those conversations. Frankly, it is because we've pressed that point consistently, not just this year, but in previous years as well. Credit the state Senate for going on a listening tour and listening intently to what people told them, especially here in King County and the urban core of the state of Washington. They have fashioned a concept paper. We have not seen a bill yet. And we've been through now 4 sessions of legislature this year and know what I would consider to be substantial progress on this needed outcome. So hope springs eternal. I'm an optimist, as are all of us dealing with this issue. We will continue to press that, and hopefully over the committee weekend coming up here in the next few weeks, we may see yet another special session to deal with this issue. That's the hope. Whether there is a bill that answers the call, we'll see. My fear is that the state Senate will do too little and ask too much relative to the House, and we may not be able to get there.
The good news is that that bill, or the concept that Senator King has put out, does incorporate what we've asked for as the local option, to at least allow the people of King County to chart our course.
There's a lot of issues with explain that,
yeah.
what you're looking for, because basically you're talking about the ability to raise some money through taxing that would then help offset these cuts. Explain what you're hoping for.
There's a House bill that passed in June that would provide for the local options. It would provide a motor vehicle excise tax option up to 1.5% of the value of the vehicle. Those dollars would go for both transit and roads in King County, helping to solve both of those problems. That was very acceptable to the broad coalition that we put forward, and obviously to the House of Representatives, moving that bill forward. We would hope that that would be what the Senate would accept. Seemingly so far they're in league with that and think that that's a good idea, but the bill has not been put forward nor passed and adopted and gone to the governor for signature. So we're still pressing that option. That's preferable to us at this point to be able to do that. It raises $75 million on an annual basis, which allows us to keep the system going, but also growing, which is a necessity.
And is that enough to keep the system, stable?
Yeah, the gap we have now that we need to fill is about $75 million per year. Now, just keeping the system as it is today is not really sustainable. As we mentioned before, we're at record ridership. We have many routes that are very, very crowded all throughout King County. And we really do need to figure out how to grow, one way or the other. This county is going to grow. It's a very dynamic part of the United States, and we want it to remain that way. And we do need to grow the transit system. So we've got to find a solution that keeps the service on the road. We want to be as efficient as possible with that service and how that we manage the service every day. And that's the demand we have from our King County Council, to make sure that we're providing maximum value for the tax dollars. But we still have to figure out as well how to grow. And we've got to have the financing to preserve the system and to allow that kind of growth to meet the demands in King County.
The potential for having that taxing authority that you really want to have, is that something that at this point you think that there is enough support in the legislature? or is it still one of those bargaining chips that you have to go down? Because we haven't made any progress on this yet.
It is a very tough political sell statewide. There are legislators, particularly senators, who do not want to take that, what they consider to be a difficult vote. But that there's no tax vote associated with this. They simply are giving the King County Council the authority to then pass something that would go to the voters. The voters in King County will be the ones who will ultimately decide whether to raise this revenue or to accept a substantially lessened transit system. So basically, providing us the authority, which when then we pose the question to the voters, is all we're asking them to do. But they still consider that to be a tough political vote. Easy to do when you're not from King County, but very difficult for the rest of us who are trying to make this economy work through the transit system, which I will add is far less expensive than building new highways.
So where are we now for the riding public? Obviously, you can say alert, 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 but what do you want the public to do who could potentially feel the real impact of this?
Well, first of all, we want our customers to be aware of what we're facing. We want our customers to get involved. We have a lot of information on our website, and I hope our customers and the general public go to our website. We're going to be doing a lot of public meetings over the next 2.5 or 3 months. So when we released the proposal last week, that commences about a 2 or 3 month public outreach program. We're going to try to get out to as many places in King County as we possibly can. The website will allow you to both find out what's going to happen to the services that you use, and you can ask questions. We'll have an FAQ on the website. We'll have a Q&A on the website. So we want the public to have a say, most importantly, and have the ability to provide feedback to us. But that awareness raising is really important, because that's ultimately going to be vital for state legislators. It's going to be vital for the council that has to make a tough decision. And lacking a stable funding source, by the spring, we would have to bring the firm proposals to council for council action later next year, and we could see reductions as early as September of 2014.
Now, hasn't there been some talk in the council and in the county of just moving ahead with some effort to try to raise that money, even if the legislature doesn't act?
That is correct. And just to add to what Kevin mentioned, from the beginning, over the last 5 years, we've engaged the public in this conversation about the choices that we face, how we need to reform the system, all that we can do in order to keep service going. So they are very aware of where we are, and we've been transparent about it and the stark choices that are now in front of us. But we do have some residual authorities given to us by the state legislature, which if the legislature does not act, we like to call it Plan B. We would formulate that, the executive bring it to the county council, and hopefully put it out for the voters sometime next year. Perhaps not as good as what the legislature could provide to us, but at least giving the voters the chance to save their system or accept the system with the cutbacks that now we must face.
What's the difference between what might be that action as to what you would rather have the legislature do?
The authorities that we have provide for what's known as a transportation benefit district. It is reliant on sales tax and car tabs. With sales tax, that just raises a already very high sales tax and a very regressive tax as well, and not directly related to highway use like a motor vehicle excise tax would be. So those are the kinds of things. While it raises revenue that would help us solve the problem, it may not be the most acceptable way to solve the problem in terms of a revenue source.
But it's an option at this point.
It's an option at this point. It's one we've told the legislature we will act on if they don't.
You know, we talk about the potential impact on routes and cutbacks there. Would there also be the possibility of fares having to go up, as well as looking at how this affects your culture of Metro and how you balance all of that?
Well, as part of some of the actions that Larry mentioned earlier included fare increases. We increased the fare 80% over 4 consecutive years of 25-cent fare increases in each of the 4 years. We have the highest ever portion of our expenses are recovered by the fare box now, close to 30%. And fares are always going to be part of the conversation. We're likely going to ask for a fare increase beginning in 2015, and in fact, our finances are dependent on that. So the $75 million gap assumes a fare increase in 2015. Now, there's a balancing act of fares and keeping a system that's widely available to all our customers, people who can afford it and people who can't easily afford it. And transportation, it can be expensive. So we want to make sure that the fares are recovering the appropriate amount of the system cost. To solve the problem just through the fare box, it just doesn't work. The fare would have to be so high that it would drive away such an incredible amount of our ridership that it would just be a bad outcome altogether. Our fares are fairly typical of fares throughout the United States and really worldwide. So we think we're in fairly good shape. There's also talk of a low-income fare. There was an advisory committee earlier this year, and that's something the council will have to take up as well. So there needs to be a balancing act. And I should point out, when you asked how business is reacting to this crisis, 1,600 businesses in King County, 1,600 businesses provide transit passes to their employees. They see that as a very, very important employee benefit to help attract and retain good people in their businesses. So passing on fare increases to the employers is also an additional burden for employers, and we would risk the employers beginning to move away from that benefit, which we don't think is really in the best interest of the overall transportation network here.
All of this seems so strange in the fact that our economy is finally starting to rebound, and the potential for actually having a negative effect on that rebound.
That's really part of the difficulty that we've had in the conversation with the Olympia, in particular the state Senate. We've been through a very difficult period of time for the state of Washington, for people of King County getting through the Great Recession. We didn't cause it, but we had to bear that burden. And we've done the best we possibly could to get through that period of time to recover our local economy, of which we're very proud and very thankful that it's here. But why should we endure this damage again? Why should we risk that relative to a recovering economy, not only for ourselves, but for the state of Washington as well? This broad coalition led by the business community to try and get this done here, they understand the delicate balance of this recovering economy. Why threaten that when we're right on the cusp of having another wonderful economic return here?
When you say that the Senate Majority Coalition's recent concept proposal that they came out with, and the potential that there's questions, I know, from the folks in the House, have you reached out to both sides here to try to find some common ground so that we can get some action done?
The conversations continue. As I mentioned, we continue to not only have those conversations, but bring the pressure so they understand the importance of this to the economy, to the state, to all of us, and to look at the alternatives to hopefully fashion something that we can agree on. Progress has been made in terms of those conversations. There's no doubt about it, and applaud all the legislators who've helped to fashion that. But we're not done yet. And this decision point is now not something that's theoretical. This decision point is very real. We know that here in King County. Many of those who study this issue understand the very delicate point at which we're at currently. And so the legislature simply needs to fashion a bill that can pass both houses and get the governor's signature so that we can get on with a recovering economy and getting people to and from work with dispatch. A system that really needs help, that serves this public well. They need to answer that call.
So it seems we're in a countdown right now. What's the deadline, I guess, to really have something done so that we can avoid all this?
Well, the first deadline is next June. I'll let Kevin speak to that a little bit, because he's been heralding that we will, if the state does not act, we will see substantial cutbacks on the waterfront that will impact people trying to get to and from work.
Well, we have to balance our budget, and we've spent 5+ years now struggling, in the face of this huge collapse in our funding source and these $800 million of actions, and which is about $150 million in ongoing efficiencies and revenue improvements. But we've got to balance the budget, and we have a temporary funding source that the state authorized King County to impose, that then the council, through a supermajority vote in the summer of 2011, imposed. That funding source, which is a $20 vehicle license fee, expires in June. And all the other cash reserves that we have that have allowed us to, in effect, deficit spend. We've been deficit spending to keep service on the road. They're exhausted by this summer. So by June, the council will have to act to make the decision on beginning to balance our budget through a phased program of service reductions, which would start in September. The June date, the other June date that Larry mentions is another looming problem, and it's actually more imminent. We have a contract with the State Department of Transportation that's been providing additional service for the services that operate on State Highway 99, on the viaduct, to compensate for the construction and the slowdown in traffic. We've seen a 43% increase in transit ridership on that corridor. Because we're putting out a good transit product for people who are choosing to do this rather than sit in traffic clogged up by the construction of the tunnel. That contract expires in June, and we've also been working very hard with the governor and the State Department of Transportation to try to find a way to keep that mitigation service, as we call it, going for the next 2 years before the tunnel opens. If that doesn't happen, people in West Seattle in particular are going to see a very, very large decrease in service beginning of June this year. So that's a problem. It's a little different than our structural deficit, but it's looming and it's imminent, and we've got to find a solution to that as well.
Go ahead.
The importance of that is that in June, if the state does not act again responsibly, it is the state highway we're talking about in terms of the viaduct, State Route 99, and the mitigation that they are responsible for providing to keep people moving on that corridor while construction is going. Should they not act, that's the first point at which you will see substantial transit reductions. And it's an example of what the rest of the region is going to see if the legislature does not act to provide revenue to solve the system-wide problem.
So the next step here really is to, as we're doing now, get the word out to the public that all of this is looming. We've been talking about this for some time now, and it's now no longer just crying wolf. I mean, the wolf is at the door. So at this point, it's now reaching out to the public. And again, what are you hoping to accomplish in these public meetings that you have?
Well, our obligation as the transit agency is to inform the public and provide maximum amount of information as transparently as possible about what's going to happen to the transit service and why. So we want to ask your viewers, all the people of King County, get informed, get educated. We'll do our very best to interact with you. We'll do our very best to answer your questions, so that at the end of the day, all the citizens in King County, the users of our system, the voters of King County, will be able to make informed decisions, and those informed decisions should affect decisions that our state legislators are going to make, and eventually decisions that our King County Council members and King County Executive have to make. That's citizen participation. We're a public agency, we're public servants, we're paid by the tax dollars, so we just want to make sure that that awareness is there, so that we don't want to do this quietly, behind closed doors. At the end of the day, these are public decisions that will have to be made.
Are you asking the public to reach out to legislators?
Every single day. I'm about speaking on this issue as often as I possibly can, get the call out, but let them also know that there is an answer and they can participate and help get that answer by contacting their state legislators, and make them understand how important this is to their quality of life and to their families. Transit is very popular here in King County, more so all the time. People find our system to be something that they want to access and use. It's not their only means of mobility, but it's a critically important one. So we're telling them what's going on, what they face, what their future looks like, and asking them to contact their legislators.
So time is of the essence, gentlemen, and I know that you feel that every day. Thank you for your time to discuss what is a really important and more pressing issue every day. Kevin Desmond and also Larry Phillips. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the King County Connects. You can find out more about Metro Transit's pending cuts. Visit online at this website. I'm Enrique Cerna, and we'll see you next time.